of September. Welcome in particular to the public in the public gallery and to our public speakers who will be addressing us on this application, and also, of course, to the press. I'll introduce our principal officers. On my right is Mr. Oliver Bolter, he's the Strategic Manager for Planning and Infrastructure. To his right, Ms. Sarah Wilkinson, who is the Planning Development Manager, and to her right, Mr. Russell Chick, Planning and Development Manager. Well, Mr. Neil Trowson is our Highways Representative for Island Roads. Mr. Ben Gard sits on my left, he's our Legal Advisor, and Ms. Jo, also a Legal Advisor, and Committee Clerk Liz B. Bartlett. Few housekeeping notices before we begin in earnest. So there are no planned fire drills during the meeting. If you hear the fire alarm, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safest escape route. The nearest escape route is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or the public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park around the building to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. Lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please don't re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a council member. I could ask if everyone just checks that their mobile phones are switched off or to mute, and for all speakers to use the microphone. So that's just the silver button to your right, and to switch off once you finish speaking. If I can ask that no food is consumed except for medical needs. Colleagues will no doubt remember that you cannot leave the chamber during the presentation or the debate, and if you do so, then you'll be unable to vote on that application. Members of the public, I appreciate this is an application which is emotionally quite fraught, so if I could ask that you refrain from any expostulations or ejaculations at all. This is a process that we really need to make sure is done fairly and that everybody has a fair bite of the cherry. I'll run through the lighting system. When you're asked to speak, the green light will display. Then the amber light will flash for a few seconds. And then when the red light displays, I'll stop you from speaking. That's to ensure that all parties receive the same amount of time and that the process is fair. So we move then to apologies and changes in membership. We have apologies from Councillor Fuller. Councillors Lilly and Adams will be speaking on the application. So Councillor Adams is being substituted by Councillor Gladwin, and Councillor Lilly is being substituted by Councillor Stewart. There are no other changes that I'm aware of. So we move then to the previous meeting minutes. Any addendums or errata, or everybody in favour of those? Against? That's carried. Thank you. We then move now to declarations of interest on this single item agenda. Councillor Quirk.
I, along with some other members of the Planning Committee, have considered this application twice previously. And whether we voted for or against approval on those occasions, we are entitled to not vote differently this time unless new material planning considerations are raised in the officer report or during the submissions to the committee. However, I would approach this consideration of the application with an open mind, considering the application on its merits as presented by the committee to the committee. Having considered and voted on this application twice previously, I can probably be considered to be predisposed to vote the same way this again, unless there are good reasons to reassess my conclusions. However, being predisposed does not make my decision predetermined. Other members with a similar position to myself may wish to associate themselves with this declaration.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie.
Yes, I would like to associate myself with the declaration made by Councillor.
And yes, shall I assume that everyone is going to associate themselves with that statement? Yes, excellent. Any other declarations of interest at all? Councillor Spink.
Perhaps I should just say that in addition to voting, I did support the judicial review, but I've declared that on a previous occasion, and that why I supported the judicial review was a procedural matter rather than a substantive merit of the application. And rather like Councillor Quirk, I'm probably predisposed, but I'm not predetermined. Thank you.
Thank you, Spink. I believe legal have no problems with that at all. So yes, understood. Councillor Brodie.
Councillor Chair, sorry, I'd just like to raise the issue of Councillor Gladwin being at this meeting.
Can I interrupt?
I think we
Point
need
of
to let,
order.
I will certainly give you a right to reply, Councillor Gladwin, but Councillor Brodie has raised as a
This isn't
procedural
to
matter.
do With the
Well, I think we need to hear what
meeting
Councillor
in
Brodie
hand.
says first. And
And
I'm
it's-
sure Councillor Brodie will be decorous in his language, but he does have a point if he wishes to make it. He is,
This is not democratic. This is a threat that Councillor Brodie has made to me regarding this.
Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. That's a good example of what we do on this council. Councillor Gladwin has, like a lot of members of this council, has a number of rental properties. Every member of this council, other than her, declares them on their members' declaration of interest available on the website. Councillor Gladwin, since she was elected, has not declared those interests. She has
Can
a
I-
number of,
I ask you
Because
just to
this
wait.
is
I will give you
no
a right of
relevance
reply. And
to
I
this
think
meeting.
this is
and
in
this
the
is
public domain,
Typical of
Councillor
Councillor
Gladwin.
Brodie. He is harassing and bullying me regarding this. I am under threat.
I don't believe that Councillor Brodie is threatening. I think he is raising a point of order, which is a constitutional provision. I think it does seem to me reasonable to raise it.
I do not believe this is reasonable to raise
Yeah,
this.
Chair, Councillor Brodie is threatened on emails to raise this.
He has made the threat to raise this, and there's no relevance to this meeting.
Chair, can I assist in any way?
before Mr. Fernandez comes in.
Please
Yeah,
do.
thank you, Chair. If I can just make a point about the declarations of interest, the declarations of interest are being dealt with, and just to be clear with members, Councillor Gladwin has declared interests with the monitoring officer, but those interests are not in the public domain because there's an issue about the sensitivity of those interests, and that is something that is actively being discussed and considered by the monitoring officer function. So what I'd say, councillors, is that as far as any item before this committee to be considered, if Councillor Gladwin has got an interest that impacts on the decision the council needs to make, the planning committee needs to make, then she has an obligation to declare them. But what I would suggest, Chair, is that rather than have a difficult discussion on an important planning issue, these issues can be taken online. But from the monitoring officer function, I am satisfied that if there are interests to be declared, they have been declared with the monitoring officer. Thank you, Chair.
I've taken some legal, I'll come to you, Councillor Quirk, in a moment. So I appreciate the sensitivity of the concerns, and I can see that Councillor Gladwin is distressed, and that is something that I do not wish to perpetuate. That said, I think Councillor Brodie has raised a point, and I think he should be allowed to make it, but I believe he will do so very politely and briefly, if I may prompt you, Councillor Brodie, and then we will give Councillor Gladwin the chance to reply, and we will.
That was
Just say that if I have any.
Wait, you have no standing on this point, please.
If I have any, I will declare them, and I do not need to be Councillor Brodie. I think it's outrageous that I am expected to be subjected to this. Nothing to matter in hand. It's absolutely outrageous. You should not be allowed to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Gladwin. Councillor Brodie, do you wish to conclude briefly, if I could prompt you?
Well, he should not be indulged in this.
Councillor
He
Gladwin.
should not be indulged. This is bullying and harassment.
Yeah, okay.
And this is actually
I think I'm going to have
police
to.
matter.
Yeah.
This is a police, yes, it is.
Yeah. I think
I
I'm going to
will
have
be.
to note
I
that
will be.
the point
I will
has
be.
been
I will
made.
be.
I'm going to draw a line under it. I apologise to anyone who's watching online. The point essentially that Councillor Brodie has raised is this. There is a function and a requirement by which all councillors make a declaration of their pecuniary interests, including their property interests. Now, they can make it. Councillor Gladwin, excuse me, Councillor Gladwin,
Threaten personal
I'm
violence.
making a point
I do not
so
have
that people
to.
can understand what the situation is.
Dispensation.
I
Because
understand.
I'm
Will you
threatened
let me make my point? This is just an objective point regarding how it works for people who might be watching, which is simply that you can get a dispensation where you are potentially, amongst other reasons, at fear of harassment or intimidation, at which point the monitoring officer will make a determination, which he has done here. He's accepted the point that Councillor Gladwin has made regarding why that should be kept from the public, as it were. And he also has made a ruling essentially saying that he's seen and considered the matter. He doesn't feel that it's in conflict with the application before us. Mr. Fernandez, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. You've summarised it really well. Just to reiterate, I have no concerns that Councillor Gladwin's involvement in this matter impacts on the interest she's declared to us. If there are other interests, then she'll need to declare it. But I think you're good to go, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Councillor Quirk, followed by Councillor Brodie. Councillor Quirk.
Can I come back? I haven't been allowed to finish at all.
Well, I think you've made your
made my
point,
point.
Councillor Brodie.
This is just bullying and harassment, and this is why I need this dispensation, because it's bullying and harassment by Councillor Brodie. And he's inciting other people to bully and harass me the same. And it's outrageous. This is not democracy. This is not democracy.
Councillor Brodie, you have a separate point of order. Have I not summarised your point of order?
He will not stop. And this is what he's doing. He's harassing and bullying me, as he has many people on the council.
I'm going to determine that we revisit this in another forum, because this is not the function of planning committee. We also have a time constraint. There are other mechanisms, for example.
I already have 2 complaints against Councillor Brodie for his bullying and
Councillor
harassment.
Quirk. Councillor Quirk, your microphone.
I was unable to hear what the Deputy Monitoring Officer said because Councillor Gladwin shouted over it for the first half of it. Not at all helpful. I think we do need to listen to the Monitoring Officer and take his advice, and actually shouting him down does not help the situation. I would like to hear what the Monitoring Officer actually
The Monitoring
said.
Officer has already said
Thank you,
that
Councillor
this
Quirk.
has nothing to do.
Councillor Gladwin, if I could really ask and encourage you, it's impossible for us to continue this with you speaking over other members. Now, we're trying to deal with this as sensitively as possible, and I really do understand it is a sensitive issue for you. I do not wish to cause you any emotional distress, but points have been raised. I have made a ruling that we are going to move on from this now. However, I am going to invite Mr. Fernandez to make his point again, because I don't think it was heard the first time. We'll come to Councillor Brodie, but if I could bring in Mr. Fernandez.
Can I just make my
first.
been interrupted every time by
You have, Councillor Brodie. I agree. I agree.
About a legitimate point I wish to make.
I'm going to.
You just will not stop. You will not stop. Just stop. just let us get on with the meeting.
Councillor Gladwin, please. I'm going to invite Mr. Fernandez to speak. Councillor Brodie, I will allow you to briefly speak, and then we will move on, subject to Councillor Gladwin having a right of reply. Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully members can hear me clearly. In terms of the declarations of interest, there are two aspects to this. One is declaring the interest with the monitoring officer, and the other aspect to this is publishing it on the public register. So there's a register the monitoring officer has, and there's a public register. We confirm that Councillor Gladwin has declared her rental properties to the monitoring officer, and those interests haven't been put on the public register because there's an issue about sensitivity. Yeah, and that's a determination that the monitoring officer needs to make with the councillor involved, and that's a process that we're going through. However, as far as this meeting is concerned, Councillor Gladwin will still need to declare, whether it's on the public register or not, if there is an interest that impacts on the decision she needs to make today, she would need to declare that interest. So my understanding is there is no interest for her to declare, because nothing in this meeting has impacted on the her register, whether with the monitoring officer or publicly. So as far as I'm concerned, from Councillor Gladwin's point of view, I think the meeting is good for her to go. Unless she's got an interest I'm not aware of, I think she can participate and vote in this decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brodie, briefly, if
So in summary, Chair, what the monitoring officer has said is we have to rely on his word, and the members of the public and the members of this committee are not allowed to know why we should rely on his word. One person, who frankly has nothing to do with the Isle of Wight, he's a contractor because of the absence of the substantive monitoring officer. His word is that Councillor Gladwin does not have any relevant interest on this application before us tonight, or any other application before the planning committee in the future. Now, I find that quite strange that members of the public, islanders, and members of this council and this committee are not allowed to know when every other member declares all of their property interests. How are we to know that these properties will not be impacted by the application before us tonight, or before other applications she may sit in judgment on in the future? I find that very strange. I wish to register my objection to that, and I also wish to register my concern about the monitoring officer's decision, a decision that has been challenged by a majority of members of this council at the last full council, and in a petition that was sent to him at the time, and which he has still not reacted to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Councillor Gladwin.
Councillor Brodie has been carrying out a campaign of bullying and harassment and hatred towards me and towards Reform UK. And this has been the only weapon that he has to use against me. And I am reporting this to the police, and I've already put in 2 complaints against Councillor
We need
Brodie,
to
and I will
avoid anything which is scurrilous, potentially. So let us now draw a line under this. We will move on to any other declaration.
bullying and harassment. And if I have a interest, I will declare it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So I've been advised simply by legal to note Councillor Brodie's points, and we will draw a line under it on that. Yeah, understood. Yeah. Any other declarations of interest? We will move on then to public question time. No public questions have been received. I don't know if there are any public questions extempore, as it were. No, in which case we will move straight on to agenda item 5, which is the substantive planning application. So I turn to Ms. Wilkinson. Ms. Wilkinson.
Sorry, turn the microphone. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. A number of you will have seen this presentation before because it is back in front of the committee. It has previously been considered. I will, however, run through the whole presentation again because there are members of the committee that are new to this matter. You have all the papers in front of you pertaining to the previous report in relation to this matter. Please bear with me through the presentation. I will be referring to my notes probably more than normal, simply that I want to make sure that I impart the same information I've given to all of the members to the new councillors as well. So please bear with me. I'd also just to highlight to councillors the update paper in front of you. It provides some corrections and provides some additional comments that have been received. So hopefully you've all had the opportunity to look through that at the beginning of the meeting. The application site relates to the area on the slide within the red line. Bear with me and I will get a pointer up so you can see that. So it's the area within the red line. This is an area of 38.16 hectares. For locational purposes, at the north of the slide, you have Apley Road. You then have Marlborough Road running down this western boundary. The existing Hope Road runs in along here. You then have Bullen Road at the south and Calthorpe Road to the along here. So for locational reasons, hopefully that's helpful. Just moving through to a Google image, which is probably slightly easier to see in terms of the application boundary. I firstly would say the red line and the blue line has a slight health warning because I've drawn them myself. So they are slightly squiggly and may not be precisely perfect, but they replicate as much as possible the one from the previous plan, which is the red line. So in terms of the red line application boundary, that is what is in front of you. Hopefully you can recall that when we look at the other one. This is an indication of the approximate area of the site in relation to that Google image. The red line is the application boundary, again, to help locationally. When we were on site, we referred to the TrueCast factory quite a few times. It's a good locational marker. That is at the point of the cursor. And we also have the existing farm buildings that we also walked past on both occasions we've been to the site. In this Google Street View, you also have Google Earth, you also have the updated layout that shows the now completed Hope Road development, which is in here. As well as the red line, you have a blue line within that plan. This plan, that is what is referred to within the report as the Curlew land or the Curlew mitigation land. That is the area in blue. Hopefully this image helps you see the relationship between the site and that land. I'm now going to run through relatively quickly some images of the site and the surrounding area. We have all undertaken a site visit and therefore you will be familiar with these. But just as a marker, you've got properties within Hope Road and the existing farmhouse, which will be retained as part of the proposed development. We then have some images of some boundaries of the site. We saw this rear wall, this eastern boundary while we were on site. And the other boundaries in and around the site, as well as a panoramic view. We talked a number of times on site about those trees being the kind of markers. You've got the farm buildings in this point, and then you've got those large trees that would be retained that we identified through the layout plan. Hopefully that brings it back to mind. We then have some images of the coach house. And the surrounding farm buildings, which would be, the farm buildings would be demolished to allow access from Bullen Road. The coach house is the point in which we have one less unit in terms of the net gain. That's currently one property. The application would see that split into 2 units. I'll go into slightly more detail on that as we work through the presentation. I've then provided some further photographs showing some properties along Bullen Road, as well as the coach house. To where we stood on site visits and when we entered the site on site visits, it was at this point of the coach house. That would be the entrance, in essence, into the coach house, and then the access to the site would be slightly further down, which I have images of as we move through. We've then got some further panoramas of the site and images of 125 Marlborough Road, which councillors will recall from the site visit we observed, which is where the garage of that property will be removed and a 3-metre wide multi-user route will run through from the site to Marlborough Road in place of that garage. Again, I have further detail on that in the presentation. In terms of the application itself, This is a coloured site plan, which the proposal incorporates 104, no, not at all, apologies, 473 dwellings. 35% of those would be affordable housing. That equates to 166. There would also be, as part of the application, a doctor's surgery, a cafe with a 10-hectare sang, 2 multi-user routes to the surrounding rights-of-way network, the one onto Marlborough Road, as we discussed, another that runs down in this location, which was the funny dog leg on the red line plan, which links to an existing right-of-way onto the wider network. There would also be associated off-site highway works, the demolition of the farm buildings, both at Westacre Farm, where we entered the site, as well as the dairy off Bullen Road to accommodate the access. The scheme incorporates 3 access points, as we've briefly discussed, one from Apley Road, one from Bullen Road, and then a further one from Hope Road. Oh, no, sorry, up here, Hope Road. I've incorporated another layout that's just a black and white version. It's exactly the same, but I thought for completeness, I would show that also. I think we had that at the site visit. Councillors would have seen that because we discussed the dots being proposed tree planting. I've also included this image, which was included with the last presentation, because I think it's useful in terms of seeing context and character. This is typically called an urban grain diagram. And what it shows is the proposed development in the context of the wider settlement. What officers thought this was useful to show, that was from our perspective, what you have here is the proposed development layout. And what it does do, we consider, is that for locational purposes, you can use the true cost factory, again, in terms of at the point of the cursor, which is quite a useful point. What it demonstrates is that actually built form doesn't move any further north, south, east or west than existing buildings within this settlement pattern, as well as the density of the scheme being showing the transitional nature of this site. So you have far more dense development in this part of Ryde. It's then getting less dense, and then the application would also incorporate less dense development as you move through to that more rural part of the settlement. This shows the phasing plan. You will see this throughout the presentation as I move through the proposed developments plan, layout plans for each phase. But I think it's useful to incorporate. It works through each phase of the proposed development. However, councillors, you will note that there is a condition 3 on the application, which actually requires the agreement of a phasing plan for each element of the development. So it requires details of phasing for the highway works, for the buildings, for the open space and for the SANG. SANG, I should say, stands for Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space. Apologies. What that would allow is some flexibility to that phasing plan, so that if it was proposed, if the developer was able and they wished to construct phase A at the same time as phase G, they could do. We'd just split it and work through the phases in that manner. What I'll now do is run through a range of images that show each phase and the layout attributed to that phase. And then the other elements that are incorporated within that phase that might be helpful. What you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen for every image is a circle area of where that phase sits within the wider development. This is phase A. Phase A is proposed to incorporate 50 units, as well as the proposed surgery and the car parking, whether we call them pagodas or carports. But what you will see is that in this area of the layout, it's also repeated by the cafe for the SANG, is you've got what look like hatching. In essence, I've got images of these. These would be carports over the car parks, which would allow for solar panels to be installed so that electric charging points could be operated by solar panels, reducing the energy uptake from those. So you have the proposed layout, the access off Apley Road, and the proposed land for the doctor's surgery with the associated car parking and those carports. What I haven't done is included every single elevation of every single property because we simply don't have the time. And I thought it was useful, therefore, to incorporate street scenes for elements of each phase. They are of a relatively similar design. Also, councillors have been on site and have seen the existing buildings within the Hope Road development. That is often referred to as phase 1 of this site. The design concepts and materials are the same as, in essence, Hope Road. So it's incredibly similar. So if you have that image in your head, that is in essence the design concept that the scheme would look through. But I have included some street scenes and some indicative design and some designs to help visualize that. Within this image, it shows the street scene running through Apley Road. So where you see that dotted line, sorry, if I can move my cursor slightly more quickly, the dotted line here that runs through, that shows where in fact the street scene cuts. So it should be one long image. It doesn't fit as one long image, but that's the cut point as you sit them next to each other. So hopefully that makes sense. And that would be the street scene onto Apley Road. You then have the street scene here, slightly further down at the point of this line through the site. Moving through, as I said, on the site visits, we've undertaken that we have seen the properties that have been constructed on Hope Road. These are some CGIs of those properties that show the typical design of units that the scheme would incorporate within those street scenes and those phases. The application also includes for a doctor's surgery. It shows the ground floor and the first floor plan of that surgery and the elevations. You will note that the plan shows consulting rooms on the first floor and office space on the second floor. Offices and doctors are the same use class. So in essence, you'll see from the conditions that the building would have the ability to all be used as a doctor's surgery or have doctors and an office space, but it has to provide a doctor's surgery as part of the conditions controlled by the application. You'll also note within the heads of terms that the land for the doctor's surgery would be gifted to the ICB NHS as part of the development under an agreement that the doctor's surgery should be built. That's all within your heads of terms and the further information or the principal section of the update of the report. Then further other elevations and a roof plan of that surgery building, I should say. Moving on to phase B, this would incorporate 66 units in the layout as shown. That includes the existing farmhouse that sits here. Again, we've got the TrueCast factory for spotting locational wise. And again, some street scenes in association with that element of the site. And move on to phase C. This would incorporate 57 units as part of the layout, as well as the cafe building that is to be constructed in association with the SANG. That cafe would also have a car park, which would incorporate the pagodas, carports with the solar panels on top. Again, we have a street scene showing through that phase of the type of units and how they would move with the levels, and some elevations of that cafe building. Moving through further, we get to phase D. This would incorporate 51 units as shown on the plan. And then phase E, which would be 30 units. Phase F, which would be 77 units. Within this phase, councillors may note that when the application was originally advertised in 2020, it had 2 more units as part of the layout. Those units were removed from this part of this part of the site, of this layout, because they were considered to be too close to trees. So those are the 2 units we've lost over the course of the determination period of the application. This element of the scheme also includes for the link to Marlborough Road. This is the point in which it will come through into the development, as well as the proposed extension to the allotments within this area. I have some images of that as we move through. So
Councillor Adams, sorry, we're in the middle of a presentation. No. Unless this is an emergency, no. An emergency. In relation to the application, or you have a personal problem? Is it in relation to the application, Councillor Adams?
Yes, because we have a distressed councillor. I'd just like to request, if
In which
possible,
case we will take a brief
if we
pause.
could just have 10 minutes,
A 10-minute pause.
10 minutes just for Caroline to compose herself, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, certainly.
Thank
I understand. Yet we'll have a 10-minute pause. Obviously, councillors won't discuss the application during this 10-minute pause. Thank you. Councillor Gladwin, do you wish to take a few minutes? Perhaps Claire, could you accompany her or one of my other colleagues? 10 minutes, yes. So 4:45, we'll reconvene. That's fine. But just by way of an update, we're going to wait 5 more minutes and then we will proceed no matter what. So thank you for bearing with us during this. Thank you for bearing with us whilst we resolve that. I appreciate the goodwill of all concerns. We will move straight on with the presentation if Ms Wilkinson, I should say, is happy to pick up where she left off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe I was on phase F, so we will move on from there. I will go back to this phase, and as I was stating, this would incorporate 77 units. I'll just repeat a little bit that this was the phase where 2 units in this part of the site were removed from the originally submitted application in 2020 due to concerns over shading. As part of this scheme, there is also the proposed extension to the allotments, which would result in, depending on the size of the allotment provision they provide, because we learned last time, for those that are here, there are various different sizes of allotments you can provide. It would be between 4 and 8, depending on what size of plot is chosen, but the extension would provide between 4 and 8 allotments. There would also be, along this route, the multi-user route that was discussed previously that would come out at the existing garage on 125 Marlborough Road. We have again some street views of a part of this phase, and then that's multi-user route that you can see coming through there. This little triangle here is the allotment extension, so you can place yourself in the previous plan, and then that route coming through here accessing directly onto Marlborough Road, and then showing how that would work in relation to the garage being removed in this area, and then the route coming through here. That would be the resultant layout of Marlborough Road and how it would work with its driveway and the reconfiguration and the new parking garage area. And then moving through, you would also have the provision of a zebra crossing on Marlborough Road. This is 125 at this point, so you'd come out here. There is a zebra crossing on Marlborough Road proposed in order to ensure that there is then safe crossing of the road to the existing bus stops. Those being shown in this plan, which I thought would be helpful to show not only the position of the existing bus stops. The site is obviously the area in an orangey red, with the purpley pink being the Hope Road element of the site. And then you also have bus stops on Apley Road, which I'll refer to later, but this plan shows the location of those, which might be helpful if you remember that for later. But ultimately, the proposed bus stops you can see the red dots are the existing bus stops, and then you would have that route coming through at this point and that zebra crossing slightly to the north of that. Moving through, we get to phase G. This would see 66 units being proposed within this phase, as well as a 5-metre ecological buffer running along this boundary, as shown by the green lines. That was discussed on site. Again, that would be not only provide an ecological buffer, but it would also provide a setback to the existing residential properties and the proposed developments. This scheme also incorporates the proposed access onto Bullen Road, as well as the works to the coach house that we discussed earlier. In terms of the street scenes, councillors will note that the properties along the boundary with the properties here, so this is the street scene you're seeing, those would be bungalows in terms of, or single story, in terms of their relationship with those properties fronting Bullen Road. Apologies for the quality of this image. This is an existing plan of the coach house. It's currently a single property, and the proposed plans for that coach house, which would see it split into 2. Councillors may have seen from the Google that actually it has a swimming pool in the rear at this point. That would be filled in, and that would provide the amenity area for that property, with the amenity area for the other unit provided in this space. The access would then come in to the front of that, or the proposed front of that, at this point here. And then some elevations of the resultant dwelling with the gap, in essence, that would provide the space for the road to run through. Moving along to phase H. This would provide 37 units, as well as that 5-metre buffer zone shown within the green once again. And as with the previous phase, the units within this phase on that boundary with the neighbouring properties would be bungalows. Moving upward, we get to phase J. There is no phase I, just to aid confusion, in the same you don't generally get a phase Q. So there is no phase I, so we jump straight to phase J, which would include 39 units. And again, that's at the circled area. That is the final phase of housing that is proposed. And then the other element of the scheme would be the proposed circa 10-hectare SANG, which is shown within this area. For locational purposes, obviously, this is the SANG that we continue to discuss. And this is a plan showing how that would be laid out and how the ground movements would be slightly changed to give some interest. That's been developed in consultation with Natural England in terms of what they would wish to see within a SANG to add that interest, to encourage people to utilise it. It also includes a locally equipped area of play, so a leap, as well as a dog training area, again an element requested by Natural England. And obviously it would be associated with a cafe provided and discussed earlier in the presentation. The SANG is designed with a number of walking routes through it that you can hopefully make out in the orange. The intention of the SANG is in essence to provide an alternative, hence the name, to people walking their dogs on the beach. So it's trying to draw recreational pressure away from the shoreline and encourage people to walk close to home around the site. When we were on site on Friday, a number of councillors, you may have seen people dog walking in the existing open space provided within the Hope Road development. So the open space there appears to be working well, which is very exciting. An image I thought would be useful to just show a bit more detail in terms of those features. So when I referred to that there were features, these include sculptural features, sculptural mounds around the trees that add that interest to make it almost more like a park feel. And this just shows some images of those and the other kind of agility areas and dog park that was discussed, as well as benches and other features you would expect to see within such an area. I thought this plan was also useful because this shows not only the SANG at this point, as we've previously discussed, but it also shows the other areas of open space that run through the development site. So as well as the SANG, the application incorporates 6.5 hectares of open space within pockets, which is utilising where you've got existing tree belts, where they can be enhanced and provide an area of open space to embed the development within that. We then have an image just showing the councillors what it would be the bin and the bike stalls, which I thought would be useful to see, as well as the proposed garages that are associated with individual blocks. And the carports with the solar panels on the top that we discussed earlier. As previously said, the application incorporates an access onto Apley Road, this being that access, as well as a zebra crossing proposed within Ashley Road at the point of the cursor, and enhancements to existing bus stops to encourage sustainable transport through the site. I've incorporated some image up and down Apley Road, but councillors, we were there on Friday and we have been to the site before, but in an indication to just show the positioning of that zebra crossing and then the access into the site. Just for locational purposes, at the point of the cursor is the existing gate. The access is slightly further up the road to that gate. We then have proposed access onto Bullen Road. This would incorporate footpaths up to and join to the existing footpath on coming out of Clothy Way, as well as improved crossing points. You can see the tactile crossings there, and a pinch point that would again allow an improved crossing point of the road there. As you'll see, was discussed on site, there would be a pinch point providing a priority. When we were on site and when we previously on site, if you drive down Bullen Road, there is another such pinch point slightly further down Bullen Road. as part of the existing network, and then some images looking from Cothey Way, where that footpath would run down Bolland Road, and then slightly closer by the site access itself. This shows the approved access from Hope Road into the approved development, which this is the car park, I think we all saw when we went on site. And obviously that road would extend and come into the proposed site. The existing road to the farmhouse would be retained to access that farmhouse and the existing properties along that part of the site. I've also referenced other off-site highway improvements. I've discussed those throughout the presentation, but a further one that we haven't discussed yet is improvements to Apley Roundabout, which shows the incorporation of additional tactile and crossing points in order to improve that for pedestrians. I now have a number of slides which I will move through relatively quickly, and you'll get a break from my voice because I won't necessarily speak hugely at them, but will allow you to just look at them and take in the information. So I've incorporated this one because I think it's useful. If you see the site plan, please disregard the element of the red line that comes through here, because that is associated with the element of the scheme that's been removed. So that red line, please disregard that. But in all other respects, it's the application red line for the proposed development as in front of you. And what this plan aims to demonstrate is that the site is located within the landscape character area for pasture land 2. And you will see that there is a number of pasture land 2 character areas within this plan. The aim of this is in essence to demonstrate the officer's conclusions within the report that it will result in only a small section of the overall landscape character area being lost as a result of the proposed development. What I'm now going to move through, and as I said, I will not talk at them, I will simply allow you to move through and take in the information contained within, is some images taken from the visual impact assessment associated with the application. So there are a number of viewpoints I will move through. You can see where those are in terms of the numbers, where they've taken. There's a cluster around the application site, and then some coming slightly further afield, where you've got one here, one at the end of Ryde Pierhead, and then a selection of 3 in this area of purple. To explain the purple and the plan, what you have here is what we call a zones of visual influence map. And what that shows is it takes an area of 3 kilometres, which is really, you can't see much further than that. If you look further than 3 kilometres, you would simply see development in the context of what's surrounding it. It takes an area of 3 kilometres, and the purple is where you would see the development from those points and from that distance when you remove buildings and consider topography, or when you add buildings and consider topography. So it's those points where the visual influence of the development could be seen from. I will then take each of those points and provide the images that show the development against that point within the application. So you have point 1, which is up on Apley Road, which is the entrance to the site, and looking through there. We then have 2, which is at the point, this point. 3, which is here. The extent of the application site being kind of in this area of this one. We then have 4, looking from here. 5, which is up at this point. 6. Is Calthorpe Road. 7, slightly further out, looking across. In the panorama, you have the application site approximately in this area. And you've got the extent of the consented site here. 8, which is down here, along that multi-user route that we discussed that would link to the existing rights of way. The site, this line showing the extent of the application site from that view. 9, which is over here, looking across. Again, you've got the extent of the application site in here. 10, which is down here, looking across. Once again, that line you can see is the extent of the application site. 11, which is here. Again, the extent of the application site in here. 12, which is over here. 13, looking across there. Again, that line showing the extent of the application site with Ryde and Westridge, what those markers say. 14, as we discussed at the top of the Ryde Pierhead, the site being approximately in this area. We've got the Aspire Church there and the All Saints Church there for locational. And then we move on to what's referred to as the Curlew land. So the yellow area identified as IOW 46 is the Curlew habitat site that's referenced within the report. That is an area of 1.7 hectares. The application, and I've got some images of that. We did look at it on site, but that's standing from the access gate, looking across, and then slightly further down, looking across the 2 fields with that hedgerow in the middle. And then one from the top and one from the side. In essence, the mitigation, this plan shows the existing IW46 with the yellow hatching with the proposed mitigation land in blue. What this kind of ultimately, hopefully you can see this is TrueCost Factory. You've got the application red line, which hopefully you can see in context with the layout being proposed. As you will hopefully be able to see, that the mitigation land is actually the proposed development. 77% of the mitigation of the existing IW46 is actually the SANG, so it's not being built on. It is only 23% of the actual proposed development that actually builds on the IW46 area. The rest is the SANG. So the mitigation land covers an area of 6.4 hectares, and as you can see, that is on the corner of Calthorpe Road and Bullen Road, and it's the area identified in blue with a slightly lighter field details. As part of the strategy to ensure that that land is suitable and enhanced for curlew habitat, it would in essence be made to be enhanced. Those enhancements would include what you can see through the centre of this site, which is these kind of lines and curves. That would be a selection of scrapes and plateaus that would be linked by linked by an irrigation network in essence, and that would allow the area to be more of a wetland, to be more suitable for the habitat, to enhance the habitat that it currently provides, that it could currently provide for curlews. As well as that, the hedgerows running along the boundaries of the site with the roads would be allowed to grow to 2.5 metres, which would provide greater protection. There would also be various other additions, such as gates with locks and information boards to stop people going into that land, so that the habitat was protected, as well as various enhancements to the existing site, including the coppicing and the management of the existing hedgerows, so they provide better habitat than they currently do. And finally, you will be pleased to hear, I have incorporated a plan which hopefully you can make out the kind of pinky red lines through this layout, which show the sustainability routes that retain to be provided throughout the site, that shows links to, in essence, the north, east, west and east of the site to link to the existing rights of way network. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ms Wilkinson. We move now then to the public speaking elements of this agenda item. Believe that Mr Winkles has left the chamber. I will wait to see if he returns, so we will move straight then to Patricia Redpath for Nettleston and Seaview Parish. Ms Redpath.
Nettleston and Seaview is profoundly affected by this proposal, more than Ryde, and no direct financial benefit. It sits on the edge of Ryde with a major effect on Westridge Cross. Not many Ryde residents use Bullen Road, Brading Road day to day, but it is standard for us who will be badly disadvantaged by the chaos unless or until major improvements are made. There's also the major issue of drainage. Flooding problems frequently occur after a development in spite of modern amelioration. Time and again, severe flooding occurs where no problems existed before. veers high-profile issues in Newport from the Pan estate and in Nettleston to a small development more than once, despite assurances that flood prevention was installed. The County Press 23 reported complaints from residents of the first phase of this development. Island Roads quoted, "For many years, water from Marlborough and Circular Road has discharged via an existing highway surface water system onto adjoining fields and onward through the watercourse running north towards the sea outfall at Springvale. Flooding at Springvale occurred recently. If heavy rainfall coincides with a high spring tide, there is literally no outlet for the water, and it's doubtful this will be prevented by the systems proposed. Parish Council so concerned by the effect on the community that it commissioned a planning consultant to fully interrogate the application, a well-respected consultancy throughout the country. A few years ago, the Isle of Wight employed the same people to undertake an infrastructure study for the new plan. Our consultants found substantive problems in this application in the professional submission issued on our behalf. They have subsequently examined the officer report and advised of continued serious flaws, which we ask you to take on board. This proposal is not plan-led. It is not sustainable. It's not in the best interest of our communities. Importantly, the scheme's outside the settlement boundary and is not allocated in the existing adopted plan. There is an allocation in the emerging planning strategy, but which also seeks to avoid coalescence to maintain local distinctiveness and environmental quality. Adopted policies require an area action plan / master plan for this part of Ryde. Officers say the draft planning strategy overtakes it, but remember, that's not adopted and it remains in formulation. So the committee is being asked to approve an unplanned development contradicting the council's own approach to plan-led development. The applicant fails to show all brownfields options have been exhausted and gives no robust up-to-date evidence that previously developed land in Ryde has been properly considered and exhausted. The question is why we are sacrificing greenfields over brownfield sites when our policy framework is clear about brownfield. The Isle of Wight admits the proposal conflicts with the emerging neighbourhood plan. No weight, though, can be given to it, even though it's passed through Regulation 14 stage, which should at least give some weight in accord with NPPF Section 48. Our consultantly advised this is a poorly designed scheme, in particular failing on sustainable transport, e.g. removing the multi-user path to Tesco and Westridge, meaning less safe direct access for walking and cycling. Local roads are already under heavy pressure, but the mitigation relies on future contributions. There can be no guaranteed delivery or timescale. The development also does not deliver the cycling infrastructure as planned in the council's own local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. It shows a lack of ambition to deliver the council's own strategies and planned infrastructure through development. Housing mix also fails to meet identified local needs. Too few smaller and affordable homes and insufficient provision for older people. Affordable homes are clustered, risking social segregation. The development erodes the gap between Ryde and Nettleston and Seaview, accelerating coalescence between the built-up areas, undermining local identity and the rural character of the area, contrary to adopted and emerging local and neighbourhood plans. Finally, as mentioned, there are unresolved concerns about drainage, flood risk and sewage infrastructure. The flood risk assessment fails to robustly address recent severe flooding issues with no long-term maintenance plan for drainage. The officer's report weighs heavily on a plan still in emerging status, does not robustly challenge the applicant on the key issues listed. The committee is asked to approve a major and irreversible development which is not plan-led, not sustainable, and not supported by necessary robust evidence. Objectors have now had their say, and now you'll hear a glowing assessment of the proposal on behalf of the developer. Remember, these are people seeking profit and not representative of those living it. Also remember, first time round, the application was only approved by a slight margin. The initial vote was for refusal, but abandoned, followed filibustering requests for reasons and a claim that the genuine reasons put by our elected representatives were non-material. Our reasons are formulated by qualified planners. A proposal of this magnitude requires, within its application, reference to proper assessment of brownfield alternatives, master plan, AAP, or a new adopted local plan, securement of proper and robust transport for active travel, fully addressing real and proven drainage and infrastructure concerns. We talk about predetermination or predisposition, and councillors known to be against this proposal have removed themselves from participation. I trust those that are well known to be in favour, and if this and in fact any development will act with equal integrity. The Parish Council urges you today to do the right thing and refuse this application rather than set a precedent for developer-led piecemeal growth.
Thank you, Ms Redpath. We move now then to Mr Ian Delaney on behalf of the applicant. Mr Delaney.
So, here we are again. This planning application was first submitted in 2020. Since then, the UK has had 4 prime ministers, the pandemic has been and gone, and England's Lionesses have won the Euros twice. I highlight this timeline in jest, but I do not wish to detract from the seriousness of the island housing crisis, which has continued to deepen over this period. I recognise this committee has already democratically voted to issue resolution to grant planning consent for this application on 2 separate occasions. I hope today will be the final time it's in front of you. Had we started building on time, we would now have occupied nearly 200 homes. Sadly, for reasons outside our control, outside this committee's control, reasons that have nothing to do with the merits of the application, that has not happened. There's no benefit in dwelling on the cause of these delays. Instead, let's focus on the facts as they are today, because the facts provide a clear and compelling rationale for this committee's continued support for the application. Firstly, let's be clear about where the application sits from a legal perspective. The Court of Appeal ruling issued by Judge Lewis in April of this year is definitive. He ordered that the resolution of the Isle of Wight Council Planning Committee on the 25th of April 2023, proving the application, is declared valid and lawful. All 4 of the objectors' original claims regarding the way this committee and the LPA handled it were dismissed, as they had been in the High Court. The one ground the court found issue with, added to the original claim by the objectors' solicitors, was the LPA's failure to publish the Section 106 agreement prior to granting consent. We fully respect the court's judgment on this matter, but it should be noted this ground is based on a procedural technicality. We're here today to address that. I will now focus on the material considerations that have changed since consent was last granted. There are 4 key areas that have evolved. Helpfully, all of them have moved in favour of the application. Firstly, the National Planning Policy Framework was revised in December 24. In line with the government's focus on increased housing targets, it is recognised as being significantly more supportive of housing delivery. Secondly, the island planning strategy now carries greater weight. This site is allocated and is the largest contributor of homes in the first 5 years of the plan. It's so integral to the IPS. On the 6th of May this year, the Planning Inspectorate wrote to the LPA, highlighting its concerns regarding the quashing of consent. Simply put, the island cannot deliver its housing commitments over the next 5 years without Westacre Park. Thirdly, highways contributions. Although the courts were satisfied with the LPA's original position regarding highways contributions, we recognise concerns have been raised that without other developments coming forward in Ryde, there could be a shortage in funding. We've listened to those concerns and agreed to increase our highways contribution from £406,000 to a maximum of just over 1.5 million to ensure the proposed improvement works can be delivered without any other developments coming forward. And finally, healthcare capacity in Ryde. The Integrated Care Board has confirmed there's an existing need for additional healthcare facilities in Ryde. They have requested the land allocated for a GP surgery at Westacre is gifted to them. We've received the request formally from their solicitor, and the terms put forward are reflected in the Section 106. All 4 of these changes provide increased rationale for this committee's continued support. I'd like to close by highlighting the shocking disparity between housing delivery in Newport and Ryde and sharing some positive news regarding affordable housing at Westacre. Despite having near identical populations and number of households, over the last 5 years, Newport has consistently outperformed Ryde in terms of new home delivery. The headline numbers show 426 new homes in Newport versus 272 in Ryde. Scratch the surface and we see 107 of Ryde's units were extra care facilities delivered at Ryde Village, meaning only 165 new homes that local families can access have actually been delivered. The latest published data for 23-24 shows Ryde's new home delivery fell to just 12 homes versus 98 in Newport. It is clear that Ryde desperately needs new homes. The island needs Ryde to deliver its fair share of new homes, and most importantly, island families are desperate for good quality affordable homes. Which brings me to an important update. Clearly, this committee can only judge the application based on what is before you today, and the information I share now sits outside the scope of the current application. However, I can advise Captiva has now received a viable offer from Sovereign Network Group to take 193 affordable homes at Westacre. This would see additionality in the total number of affordable units being provided, with a mix of social rent and shared ownership tenures. We would work with the LPA on a deed of variation to the Section 106 to achieve this. The same approach successfully applied at Horsebridge Hill with Sovereign. If a positive decision is reached today, it is our intention to start on site within 3 months and to deliver the first homes for occupation before the end of 2026. Members of the committee who are familiar with the projects Captiva is currently delivering at Horsebridge Hill and in God's Hill will be assured of our ability and commitment to deliver this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. We turn now then to Councillor Michael Lilly, our local councillor. Councillor Lilly.
I wish planning committee members to focus on the hundreds of residents' objections to this application. Thousands of signatures on past petitions, the consistent objections of Ryde Town and Nettleston and Seaview councils, and the hundreds of residents that financially contributed to the judicial review and the Court of Appeal cases. The appeal court judges highlighted that residents' rights should have equal weighted balance in regarding an application as the applicant, the developer and landowner. This agricultural land and nature corridor has been unchanged for over 1,000 years and is the last farmland and green corridor from the sea to the inner island, which naturally protects the special protected site of Ryde and Apley Sands. The application fails to take on board the emerging Nettleston and Seaview Parish Plan and Ryde Town Council's position statement and the community-led orientation of the new draft island plan. There has been no engagement with the local community and residents. Isle of Wight Council has not fulfilled its policy obligations for Ryde to ensure future growth is properly planned, community-led and infrastructure supported. There is no community input and lack of a thorough assessment of other sites and no area action plan. The absence of an AAP is not a neutral factor, it is a material failure of planning making that should weigh against the proposal. The application relies almost entirely on undeveloped, historic and nature-rich countryside. The last few years, whilst my residents have battled with the Isle of Wight Council and the developer successfully through the courts, I would argue the site has rewild and is even more precious. However, I wish to focus on 3 specific issues. 1, pedestrian safety. This is an unfriendly and unsafe pedestrian, child and disability proposal that is totally reliant on dominant car travel and ownership, which totally contradicts active travel and inclusivity policies. Access points fail to create a safe, legible or inclusive environment for pedestrians and cyclists. The withdrawal of the pedestrian and cycle route from Bullen Road to Tesco's simply means pedestrians, those with pushchairs, those in wheelchairs or mobility scooters and cyclists have to access roads such as Apley, Bullen and Marlborough roads with huge risk of injury or death. 2, sewage. The Ryde area sewage and wastewater goes to Apley pumping station and then is pumped to Sandown underground under Westridge Farm WAP site. There is a current leakage of this part at Little Apley, and in January 2025, leakage of raw sewage on the actual site. This application is building near and over this pipeline. If it collapses, Ryde has no sewage system in place. A report on the planning portal states Southern Water have not undertaken a survey, and in fact the developer has used another private water provider in the current 88 houses on Hope Road. There is currently no agreed plan for these 472 houses to access the Southern Water sewage system, which they will have to. Torrential rain is now the norm throughout the year in Ryde, and water simply floods down the high area of the south of the town, West Acre Park area, and overwhelms the sewage system, causing releases into the Solent and damaging the protected sites of Ryde and Apley Sands and causing flood risks to residents living in the north coastal part of Ryde. Isle of Wight Council and Southern Water are not addressing this issue, and Southern Water has stated the current sewage wastewater system has no capacity for further housing. Road infrastructure. I wish to highlight section 3.65, 366 and 367, pages 38, 39 in the report, and highlight also Ryde Town Council's consistent objection to this application as 2.2, page 18. RTC states there is no coordinated highway plan to accommodate all the proposed developments which are coming forward in the immediate area. The financial contribution for the site may not be enough to achieve the substantial improvements that are required. This is an understatement. One of the outcomes of the judicial review appeal in April this year was there was a clear dispute between Isle of Wight Council Highways and Isle of Wight Planning on this issue. As there is no agreed road highways plan of infrastructure for the area, there has been no actual full costing of the highways that are needed. The mitigation funding in this report is minimal compared to the reality of millions needed. My residents are faced with a current increasing traffic issue, 10 years of building vehicles, a further 2,000 vehicles plus increased traffic in other developments without a coherent highways plan that is properly funded. The residents of Hope Road were devastated during the building of the 88 houses, and none of the things that I asked members to do, at least consider a condition in the event you ignore residents' objection and approve.
Michael, that's, I'm afraid,
this wrong development in the wrong place that prevent building site via Hope Road. Thank you.
Thank you. We turn now to Councillor Adams, who is the adjoining local councillor. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Westridge Crossroads is already at capacity. 1,900 homes plus 28,500 square metres of commercial already committed, yet to add to these junctions. There are other identified junctions to the east of Ryde that will require upgrading. The junctions have been modelled in isolation with free flow assumptions and fails to take account of the access into Pennyfeathers into the data calculations. It obviously also fails to take into account whether McDonald's is open, which at times is a major problem in this area, and I do not speak in jest. An original costing exercise which covered all of the impacted junctions commissioned by the Ryde Regeneration Group demonstrated cost of around £8 million is required to mitigate the impact of all the proposed developments. It is essential that an area master plan should be constructed, as there are a number of agreed and forthcoming developments in the immediate area. As well as West Acre Park, there is Pennyfeathers, Nicholson Road and Rosemary's Vineyard, and the master plan was recommended by Island Roads in response to the Nicholson Road application. If the Westridge plan for improvements to the crossroads are accepted, it will make it impossible to facilitate the other schemes and will create major traffic problems. The West Acre scheme, so far as the highways is concerned, depends on third-party land belonging to Pennyfeathers. Cost, acquisition, legal, reinstatement are omitted from Section 106 agreements. Proposals rely on the compulsory purchase of land within Pennyfeathers ownership. Compulsory purchase orders, legal costs are not identified in the Section 106, meaning these costs will have to be covered by the council and not the money stated as highways improvements. Although the contributions have increased, they are still woefully short. So I ask, where is this money coming from? A compulsory purchase order is mentioned as Penny Feathers are unlikely to sell the land required. There are many examples and evidence of where compulsory purchase orders have failed because they are unfairly favoured one developer. Penny Feathers is unlikely to want to sell the land, knowing that it will be used to enable the Westacre Park development in detriment to their own proposals, which will ultimately deliver far more houses than Westacre Park and would therefore be more advantageous to the island. The officer report says MPPF paragraph 116 states development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network following mitigation would be severe, taking into account all reasonable future scenarios. This is exactly the scenario facing this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. As Mr. Winkles hasn't reappeared, who is one of the objectors, we will now conclude that part of the application. So we move on to the question section. Before we do that, if I could ask those public speaking, if you could move to the public gallery, that would be appreciated. Thank you. As always, I'm quite keen to separate the questioning from the debate part of this, just so that it's easy for people at home to follow along. So questions, who would like to start us off? Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Chair. It's just something that Ian Delaney said in his speech. Basically, it's about the rent and shared ownership with Sovereign. That's not in our papers, so should we actually be considering that in this meeting?
Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffreys. No is probably the simple answer to that question. It is an agreement that they are working on. It is something they have undertaken at Acorn Farm, the site in Newport that was referenced, but the application in front of you seeks to provide 35% affordable housing, which is the policy compliant required number. So that is what the current drafted 106 requires, and that is what the application policy requires. So yeah, when you're deliberating it, the material matter is the 166, which is the 35% of the total number. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Supplementary, Councillor Jeffreys. No.
Yes, so within that 166, there is no shared ownership or in that at the moment.
Ms. Wilkinson.
So there is, at the moment, the split following the previous resolution to grant from this meeting is 71-29. So in essence, 71% of the 35% would be rental, 29% would be what we call other forms of affordable ownership. So they would be either shared ownership or reduced market or other forms of kind of affordable purchase.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Critchison.
Thank you. I was also interested in that statement from the applicant that would probably significantly change my attitudes to the amount of housing, the social housing involved, etc. So I would like to know more about that, but we can't at this stage. So we could only do it, just to be clear, that it's only on this, even though that would significantly change perhaps our decision on it.
Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a really difficult one, and I appreciate that. You've had the information from Mr. Delaney that they are working with an affordable provider to increase the number of units. that they are currently required to provide as part of the application. We had exactly this situation when we considered Acorn Farm, if councillors recall. When we considered Acorn Farm, the 106 required 35%. However, we were advised that they were in discussions and they would be providing more affordable housing in conjunction with those discussions with the affordable housing provider. Acorn Farm is now providing 100% affordable housing. They are having similar discussions in relation. You heard that. However, what we cannot do is require the 106 to provide that housing, because they won't receive grant funding for anything required by the 106. So we have to be cautious that to the extent we can make it material and the extent we can require it within the application, because it is non-affordable housing that is being provided as affordable housing, if that makes sense. So it isn't something you can give significant weight to, but it's something that you have been made aware of, that there are those discussions taking place to increase the number outside of the policy requirement.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Critchism.
I think it's unfortunate that that wasn't agreed before we had these papers.
Councillor Quirk.
My understanding of 3 points of law. The first is we can only consider the application in front of us. So consideration of what Pennyfeathers may or may not happen to do in the future is irrelevant. We're considering this application and what this brings. And we have an opportunity, if we think it will overstretch the road, to have Pennyfeathers. If and when Pennyfeathers come in, that's when we can talk about that bit. So that part, to me, doesn't seem to be particularly pertinent. It's not material to this application. Is that a fair assessment?
Mr. Guard? Yeah. Ms. Wilkinson? Yeah. Okay. Supplementary, Councillor Quirk.
So second point of law. The judicial reviews, both the initial judicial review and the second judicial review, had access to all of the information from the previous 2 decisions. All of the points that have been raised here, I don't think there's anything new that's come up. I think all of these points have been raised previously. Both the initial submission of judicial review and the appeal found that the process and the decisions that were made were perfectly reasonable. That was my reading of both of those judgments. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Mr. Guard.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Quirk, that is correct. The judicial review considered all of the deliberations of this committee, not least because the previous report to the committee, which you'll have appended to this agenda, contained all of the reports to the committee. So you are correct, yes. The judicial review and the appeal considered all of those matters.
As you're on a roll, I'll allow you another, Councillor Quirk.
Sorry. Third point of law. It's been raised that this is not consistent with the current plan, but our draft plan has been approved by this council, has been submitted to the inspectorate for approval. They appear to have given an indication that the number of homes to be built is acceptable when this is included and not without. So that says that they are minded to be supportive of that element of the plan. Therefore, we can give the plan weight the draft plan weight if we wish to. If we give weight to the this being included in our draft plan, if it was included, if the plan was approved, it would require the application to cause substantial harm for it to be reasonable to turn it down. In my opinion, this is something that we can give some serious weight to, and we should be looking at substantial harm if we are going to turn it down.
I'll assume there was a question in relation to whether that's a fair summation. Are you happy for me to put that to Ms. Wilkinson? Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to come at this as a two-angled approach, and at the same time potentially bringing Mr. Volter to assist with some of the weight questions that you were asking in relation to that matter. The first thing is to clarify in terms of compliance with the current plan. And that links to obviously the previous resolution that the committee reached in terms of this application. This application is in compliance with the current plan. I've incorporated a image that you did see in the presentation that I had in case this matter was asked, in that what you've got in front of you is on this side of the plan, you've got a thick black line. That is shown in this plan as a thick red line. Hopefully you can all distinguish that. That is the settlement boundary. What councillors will recall is that what the policy currently says is anything that is immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary in the key regeneration areas is considered to be sustainable and is acceptable for development. This site is immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary, and therefore it is considered to comply with those policies within the plan. In terms of the emerging plan, I will ask Freudian slip. I will ask if Mr. Volter can give some advice in terms of the weighting, but what I would highlight is the sections in the report that discuss this matter in terms of the inspector's acceptance of all of the allocated sites presented in the report, in the plan. So they are proposed allocations. It has gone through an examination. Although the plan has been sent back for further work, the allocations were considered to be all sound and acceptable. The work that it's been sent back to do is find more sites because we have not allocated enough housing. So that is kind of the context of the inspector's conclusions in regards to the current plan in relation to this site and generally housing slightly further. But I will pass to Mr. Volter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and for Ms. Wilkinson for graciously allowing me to speak. And just to pick up on that point, yes, you're absolutely right. In their post-hearings letter, the inspectors saw no reason to remove any of the proposed allocations within the draft IPS, which, as members will be aware, includes the proposed allocation at Westover Park. But moving on to that second part of the question, the weight to be given to emerging local plans. And ultimately the advice, certainly our advice to you as a committee, is that ultimately it is for the decision maker to determine the weight that they give to an emerging local plan. That's not to say, however, that's a blank check, as it were. There is some helpful guidance in the MPPF, paragraph 49, that gives you some context for that. And just to pull a couple of bits out which may aid you in that consideration, councillors. The first point that the MPPF talks about is the stage of the preparation of the emerging local plan. The more advanced its preparation, the greater the weight it may be given. I would also then highlight the extent to which there are unresolved objections to relevant policies. The less significant the unresolved objections, the greater weight that may be given. I think that talks to the point that we've already said about the further correspondence from the inspectors and their position that they've given to us in relation to the IPS. And then finally, there's the degree of consistency of the relevant policies in the emerging plan to the MPPF itself. And obviously, the closer the policies to the emerging plan, then the greater weight that may be given. So again, we would look to what the inspectors have said so far in their initial conclusions, and they've already given us those helpful signposts to where those areas are where they have concerns around the soundness. But as we've previously explained, none of those relate to the proposed allocations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Councillor Gladwin.
Yes, I was concerned to hear about the section 106 contributions towards the road improvements and how they will fall short of how much will actually be required to do the necessary roadworks. And I think this should be an issue. There's of great concern to all islanders who face having to sort of basically subsidise this development, or maybe these works will not take place in the end. And, you know, it's sort of a very piecemeal way of actually sorting out the financing of these roadworks, being as there's going to be further works needed at Rosemary Vineyard, Nicholson Road and Pennyfeathers. And I think it should actually be reassessed with how much the contribution, I know that they have been increased, but they're not realistic to reflect the work that will be necessary, especially when it's involving compulsory purchase orders as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Shall I assume into that a question regarding the adequacy regarding the road contribution? Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to focus on this kind of talk too significantly on this matter because I think it's covered in quite a lot of detail in the update paper. So I think it's covered in the report. In essence, the contributions that are now being sought originally, when this was first considered and when it was resolved to grant, it then gone through the JR process. The contribution was a proportion of the overall costs of the works split between the developments that have been discussed this afternoon. That was considered to be acceptable, that the court did not find fault in that element of the challenge. However, we were conscious as officers and as the developer that there was concern that those other sites may not come forward and therefore they may not be able to contribute to those works. As a result, the developer has through the legal agreement agreed to pay the complete cost of the works that have been designed for those junctions. They have been costed on current costings. They've been recosted since the original calculations. Those costings have been ratified by Island Roads as being accurate and for the works that are necessary. Those are what would be paid for in their entirety by the developer as part of that contribution. What it does, however, is have a caveat within that that says if other developments do come forward and they therefore share that cost, which was the original intention, that contribution would be proportionately reduced, which is why you've got a maximum figure. And to clarify, that which was another point that was raised previously, that contribution as part of the legal agreement is index linked. So although it's worked out on current costings of that junction, should those costings go up, that figure is index linked, and so that figure will go up proportionately. So it is currently, the proposal would cover the complete cost of the works required that have been designed for the highway improvements for those junctions, the highway improvements that Island Roads have deemed to be acceptable for the development. So what I would ask councillors to bear in mind, and this links probably to previous comments that Councillor Quirk has made in regards to what is material, is that the development only has to mitigate its own harm. So it is not expected to mitigate the harm of other developments. It must take them into consideration, so you get a holistic approach, which is why you've got this contribution that has that set reduction should other schemes come forward, which would also have to mitigate to their impacts. And therefore the scheme has been costed in order to allow that flexibility to take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Supplementary, Councillor Glavin.
So that's actually going to be guaranteed that it will cover the full cost of these junctions and any other improvements necessary.
Ms Wilkinson.
As previously stated, in essence, the proposed junction improvements works as set by this application and considered by Island Roads have been costed, and the applicant has, through the 106 agreement, signed up, for want of a better term, apologies, to pay the complete cost for those improvement works.
Thank you. The index linking, is that RPI or CPI? What is it, the broader measure, given how things have been recently with inflation?
I'm pretty sure it's RPI, okay. But I think Mr. Gard's going to double check the draft.
Broader measure, great. Any additional questions? Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. Following on, if I may, with some questions about the 106 agreement, the housing for rent, so the affordable housing for rent, is actually described in the 106 agreement as being affordable housing for rent as opposed to social housing for rent. Is it the case that the affordable housing for rent is going to be therefore simply a 20% discount off market value?
Ms Wilkinson.
The affordable housing for rent or the rental units will comply with the NPPF definition of affordable rent.
So it's yes, it will only be a 20% reduction from market value. It's not, as it were, socially rented accommodation. Is that correct?
That is the minimum requirement as per the kind of the policy. I would say that obviously we have an affordable housing provider on board. They may choose to seek a different approach to the delivery of those units, but that is what is required as part of the 106.
I appreciate that it's policy compliant, but it would be possible to put with the agreement of the developer in the 106 agreement, it would be possible to say that it will be meet the government definition of social housing for rent. That could be in there if the developer were agreeable, couldn't it?
Ms Wilkinson, are you able to speak to that? It's quite a meaty question, so we'll perhaps
meaty. It's not very meaty, Chair.
I was being charitable in terms of allowing officers to have a little time to respond.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the current proposal is for affordable rent, as you correctly say. That is a policy compliant provision as part of the application. Should councillors wish an alternative to add to require socially rent, which is slightly different in terms of its definition, and rather than being a 20% reduction, if I read you it, it says meets all the following conditions and the rent is set in accordance with the government's rent policy for social rent. The landlord is a registered provider. It includes provisions to remain the affordable price for future eligible households, or for the subsidy to be recycled for alternative affordable housing provision. So there's like a recycle clause within the social rent policy. So there, councillors could, if they were so minded, require a distinction. Obviously, the current policy is 70-30. There is no distinction within the current policy as to whether that 70 should be a certain percentage social and a certain percentage affordable. So I'd say that that's something to bear in mind if you're looking to change the provisions in any way. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Andre, followed by Councillor Quire. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Just really a matter of clarification. It's my understanding that one of the main changes, and I think we heard that as well from the applicant, is the effects of the NPPF update that came through in December 24, which gives greater weight to the principle of housing allocations. Now, I know in terms of committee members determining weight is absolutely crucial as to how much weight. So it's my understanding that greater weight can be given to this in terms of it being included as a site within the proposed allocation of the IPS. Is that correct?
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
In essence, Mr Bolton may wish to come in, but it is up to the decision maker what weight they put to any element of the consideration. So it is up to you in essence, Councillor Andre.
Mr Bolton.
Thank you. And just to pick up on that, I don't think the NPPF per se increases the weight given to allocations. That is sort of set and well established, particularly through the relevant legislation. But what it does do is talk a lot more to the importance from the government's perspective of housing and the provision and the delivery of housing, which obviously an allocation is one way of helping to deliver that.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Just a quick supplementary that's sort of connected to that. We have heard one of the requests, if you like, from Nettlestone and Seaview Parish Council is about the need to bring forward the area action plan. But as it quite clearly states in the report, I just wanted affirmed that that the policy document, so the area action plan, has been overtaken by the draft IPS, just to clarify and make that point clear.
Thank you. Mr. Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, Councillor Andre, you're correct in that understanding. It was the original intention of the Council back in 2012 when the current core strategy was adopted to undertake a series of area action plans across the 3 key regeneration areas across the island. However, events overtook, given the requirement of a 5-year cycle to update your plans. So the preparation of the island planning strategy, which if you cast your mind back actually started in 2017, was the process which superseded the approach, the original approach of preparing area action plans. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Quirk, followed by Councillor Spink. Councillor Quirk.
A thought to note. It's all right talking about having bigger discounts on rented housing, but you have to look at the viability of schemes, and the viability of delivering is one of the biggest risks to not delivering. You have to sort of have a balance view there. So, you know, if you want to have a bigger discount, you have to have fewer homes involved. So you've got to have a balance. And if you have a housing association involved in the process, they get independent funding from the government, so they can actually start to play with what becomes affordable. And I don't think we should be trying to drive that through the planning committee. I think we should leave that to the housing association.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. I won't read a question directly into that. I think that would come under a personal view, but I don't think people are going to be shouting very strongly against that. A supplementary. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of, excuse me, a couple of questions, if I may. Still on the Section 106 agreement, could I ask, please, what the local authority understands will happen if the developer were not to pay the contributions required in relation to in particular in relation to the road improvements?
Yes, Mr. Guard.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act provides enforcement mechanisms for non-compliance with a Section 106 agreement. They can be both an injunction and or debt recovery. And to that, the planning authority would give instructions to legal services to recover any monies that became due and weren't spent and weren't paid. Sorry. So if it's not paid and the agreement says it should be, the local planning authority can bring instructions to move to essentially legal services, and we will recover that money from the party who owes it.
Supplementary, Councillor Spink.
I don't have a supplementary, but I do have just a couple more, which I hope will be short questions.
If I may, I'll come back to you as Councillor Stewart has put his hand up and is waiting patiently, and I'll return. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, and it's actually part of what's just come up, so I'll deal with that one first, and then I've got one other linked. You mentioned that in section 3.65, that monies will be provided 25% after the first 100 and then subsequently 200, 300 and 400. Does that mean that those monies are actually received and then spent when received, i.e. on transport improvements, among other things? Or does it mean that those monies will be accumulated and then spent in due course in the fullness of time, depending on when the transport changes are put into place? And that's one. And then secondly, which may be a bit easier, what phases includes the affordable housing element, whether it be rented or discounted?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Ms Wilkinson.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I'm pressing a million buttons at once. My apologies, Councillor Stewart. Trying to find the answers while also taking notes on the questions. In terms of how will the money be spent, to an extent, that's at the gift of the council. In that we have requested those money in those stages in the event that, in essence, we wish to pool them with other developments, should that be appropriate if other developments come forward, or if we wish to do certain works at certain times. So it may be that we take the contribution and then we do part of the work, but we don't do all of it. An example of that would probably be I'm presuming you will all know the cross junctions around Sainsbury's. So in essence, Sainsbury's did that in phases. They provided different arms to the junction that needed it at different points of time. And then with a further contribution that was set aside, or a requirement to call on a further contribution for the works to the final arm, in essence, the one where the bridge is by the public open space. That's never been required, never been called on, because actually the traffic movements have changed from what was previously considered to be generated and thought to be generated into that junction. So it's actually never been needed. So in essence, rather than holding back and then asking the developer for all the money in one section, one, it helps them. If we phase it, it also helps us because it means we can program those works in and do different works at different times if we consider it necessary, or we would pull that and do it all at one time. And so it allows us the flexibility to control when those works are undertaken and which bits are undertaken when. In terms of the second question, I actually don't think I have a slide for that, so it's not as easy as you would think in terms of the question. In essence, there is a condition that controls both in the application in terms of the phasing, but also in the 106 that determines the affordable housing, where we would agree a final layout for those units. They are normally kind of dictated to an extent by the housing association in terms of where they wish them to go and the types of units they want. However, I am aware that there is clusters proposed. I know people have talked about clusters. Generally, an affordable housing provider will require clusters because of the way in which the properties are managed and maintained, and they don't want 2 and 3 scattered all over the place. So that's how they work on that. If I just share this slide, and then if you bear with me a moment while I try and find a more appropriate plan. But in essence, there is definitely a cluster in this part. And I know that for a fact, and then there will be elements spread out throughout the site. But if you can bear with me, I will try and find you a plan to share.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Ms Wilkinson has said that she is ambidextrous in terms of mental juggling. She's happy to take questions while she also looks up the information. So, Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. The first question, I think, is a multitasking question, so it shouldn't be too difficult, I think. And that is simply this: do we have any indication as to when it's expected that the Section 106 agreement will be signed?
I can say, well, yeah, that's a good idea.
Mr. God.
I can assist Ms Wilkinson in responding to this question, Councillor Spink. The Section 106 agreement is sat in my inbox currently, and it will await the determination of this committee before we take it any further. So at the moment we have a draft agreement. It's sat in my inbox. It will await any resolution this committee might make and any necessary changes that need to happen to it, and we'll then go through a process of being negotiated, if necessary, with the landowners and any mortgagees that are on the land. And there is one, at least one, and so yes, it isn't imminent. It isn't out for signature yet. It's there waiting, whatever this room decides tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Gard. Supplementary, Councillor.
I have a supplementary, but I do have one more question. Then that's it.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. One more question, and that is just for a change now, not about the 106 agreement, but about the road junction. The coming out of that Smallbrook Road and turning left, according to Island Roads, and also it's referred to in the officer's report, wouldn't be a safe manoeuvre for HGV or articulated vehicles, because they would have to cross the centre line. Would it be open if this committee does resolve to grant planning consent? Would it be open to the committee to have a condition of the road traffic regulation order in order to ensure that the junction is safe?
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
Should council, I'd say two things on that. It's not an uncommon situation on Island Roads. You may see that quite often. However, in answer to your question, should councillors wish for a traffic regulation order to stop the ability for HGVs to turn left, that was within your gift to require.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Councillor Gladwin.
Yes, going back to the section 106, and I was wondering what provision has been made for the cost of the compulsory purchase orders, and the fact that they're owned by Penny Feathers, and it will be a cost of about 500,000.
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'm not sure where the value of 500,000 has come from. I don't know where that figure has originated and how that's been calculated. It's not a figure I'm aware of in terms of the cost of any works. The costs in front of you in the report cover the cost of land purchase based on a valuation of the value of the land that would be required for the road widening works. So they've been specifically, we sought that and have that cost. I should make it clear, really, a compulsory purchase order is a last resort. It is only done when all other forms of negotiation fail. So it is not something the council would do lightly. It is not something we necessarily intend or wish to do. It is a last resort to which we have sought to cover the cost of the purchase if it is necessary. The process will be that there will be negotiations that will take place with regards to utilising the land in order to provide the highway works. What members can be mindful of, I believe, and I may be instructed by legal if I'm incorrect on this up front, is that although you cannot give weight to kind of other developments, Penny Feathers is also a proposed allocation in the IPS. If it comes forward, it will come forward and require enhanced improvement works to Westridge Cross in its own right. If that scheme comes forward, it will also do works to Westridge Cross. So in essence, the compulsory purchase situation is only potentially on the table should Penny Feathers never come forward or be significantly delayed to the extent that actually the level of roadworks might be slightly different anyway because you won't have Penny Feathers feeding into it. So at the point in which Penny Feathers never comes forward, there would be a question as to whether that land would therefore be negotiable in terms of its purchase or whether the council would need to go through the CPO process. But we've covered the cost of the land purchase as part of the proposed contribution. But it is an absolute last resort. The council would continue. We are currently having negotiations with Penny Feathers in regards to the submission, and we will continue to have negotiations with Penny Feathers in regards to the highway works necessary for Westridge Cross for all developments that are proposed within the vicinity of that junction. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gladwin, supplementary.
Yes, I was wondering about the master plan for the road system, and I was concerned that there is a lack of one, and I was just wondering what is proposed to put this in place, because it's obvious that we do need this.
Thank you. Can you speak to that point? Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. I can indeed. The IPS incorporates the master plan. So if the IPS had gone through and been adopted, the master plan for the road networks and all of the allocated sites within this area would be covered within that document. That hasn't happened yet. Because of the delays in the adoption of the IPS, the developer is in essence moving forward in advance of those, and they are providing their own mitigation because they cannot wait for the adoption of that document or otherwise. In that we cannot not approve any houses until the IPS is adopted. We have to work in the current policy framework. Current policy framework allows you to take contributions for highway improvements, and that is what is being proposed. So the master plan is the IPS. That includes all of the sites we've discussed as proposed allocations or existing consents, and incorporates a highway infrastructure programme in order to ensure that they are all accessed appropriately. I believe I'm right in saying the infrastructure programme is there. And so it ultimately, the master plan is the IPS. The sooner we move that through the system and get it adopted, you will have your master plan.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Further questions before we move? Oh, I believe we have the answer to Councillor Stewart's earlier question. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Please bear with me because I am actually going to share with you my full screen rather than a slide, because I don't have a slide of this. So my apologies if anything pops up. Hopefully it won't. But in essence, what you have, this is a superseded plan. So because it's something that would be controlled by the legal agreement and by conditions, I don't have an updated plan to you, but in essence, it's superseded because of the tweaks in the layout and application. The essence of the likely split is going to be the same. So I can't fit it all on the screen. So what I'll do is scroll through that plan due to the scale of the plan, and you can see at what point the indicative of the affordable are shown within the site. So they are the coloured units as we move through the site. So they are dotted through the site, but there is, as said by the public speakers, a cluster in this kind of southwest corner. In essence, that is closest to the link to Marlborough Road and the sustainable transport facilities. But that is the cluster. If I move, apologies for the way in which this is being displayed, but hopefully it is adequate to answer your question. And that will show, it's probably easier if I look at this to do that. So you have that cluster in the western corner, the southwestern corner, and then as you move through the site, you have other pockets within the development, which hopefully answers your question.
Supplementary, Councillor Stewart.
Yes, fundamentally it does answer it, so thank you. But there is an underlying question to it, which I wasn't sure how it would, how you'd show that. But it does seem to show that the vast majority of affordable development is happening very near the end of the final phases. Would that be a fair summary of that, or am I missing something?
Ms Wilkinson.
That isn't the case. So we would not allow that to happen. So in essence, that is why it's indicative, and we would require that to be agreed further through the process. I do have the draft legal agreement does incorporate the triggers. So what I will do is just pull that up, if you bear with me, and we'll advise you of where it says. I don't think I've covered this in the report. So in essence, in terms of the affordable housing delivery, we would have to have, I'm here, I've got it. In essence, not to cause or permit commencement of the development any phase containing affordable housing units until affordable housing scheme and the details of the proposed affordable provider have been agreed. So first they've got to provide the scheme. In terms of delivery, not to cause the occupation of 35 market units until 14 affordable, not to occupy more than 80 market houses until a further 25 affordable, not to occupy 119 market until 56 affordable, not to occupy 290 market until 71 affordable, which gets you to the total of 166. So in essence, we phase it in conjunction with the market delivery.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
I'd like to say thank you for that answer. It's answered everything that I have to ask about that particular point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Additional questions, Councillor? Was it a question or yes, Councillor Glavin?
With reference to page 26 and the comments from Councillor Lilly, I was just very concerned about the sewage situation and where it's leaked 3 times in the last 6 months, and these problems are not being addressed. And I was wondering if there is provision in the section 106 for the replacement of the pipeline, and if not, why not? And why has a full survey of the site by Southern Water not taken place? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gladwin. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd first draw members' attention to the update paper, as I did at the outset of the meeting, which discusses that we have now had a formal comment from Southern Water, who confirmed that there is adequate capacity to accommodate the entire 100% of the proposed development. That is the statutory provider advising us that they can accommodate the development. It is the statutory provider's responsibility to replace the existing sewer network. If it is necessary to replace it, they will have a huge management and maintenance schedule of their network. It is their responsibility. If they fail to do that, they have requirements through Ofwat and the Environment Agency should that not be achieved. It is not for the local planning authority to require a developer to replace network. That network is owned by a statutory provider. It is a separate process outside of the planning process. So that they've gone through that. In order to provide that comment you have in front of you, the reason why it is late to the report is because Southern Water undertook an entire hydrological assessment of the application of the submitted drainage strategy against their network. And that is why it has come late, because they wish to do that and have that ratified before they confirmed that they had the capacity. They're advising they have the capacity. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Glavin.
Well, it's worrying with their reputation that we have to be completely reliant on them just stating that they can deal with the extra capacity. And I would be looking for evidence of that. So I see no reason why a full survey can't actually take place.
Thank you, Councillor Glavin. Mr Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, it is my understanding that they have done the necessary surveys to inform our recommendation to you and your deliberations this evening. But I just thought it might be helpful for the room if I just quote again, apologies, directly from the NPPF, this time paragraph 201, and it states, the focus of planning policies and decisions should be on whether proposed development is an acceptable use of land, rather than the control or processes or emissions where these are subject to separate pollution control regimes. Planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively. So it's really clear that it's not downplaying concerns that people may have about the proposals and those impacts, but it's being really clear and giving us all a really clear message about what falls under the remit of planning and the decisions that we make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Bolter. Additional questions from colleagues? If not, we'll move to the debate section, unless anyone indicates loudly that they'd like a comfort break. No one seems to be. A question, Councillor Glavin.
Going back to the footpath, I was concerned that it was obviously decided not to have it in the planned location, but I was wondering what alternatives were actually explored, because I'm concerned that it's not encouraging people to use the cycle path and to walk, and instead expected to walk on the busy roads, you know, alongside busy roads. So I was just thinking what was actually looked into, because surely there was another alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Glavin. Ms Wilkinson, can you speak to that?
I can indeed, thank you, Chairman. What I'm just trying to pull up to make it easier in terms of visually see what we're referring to is a plan or a Google image. So I will again share my screen. So apologies, councillors. You have my full screen rather than a presentation, but hopefully it will be useful and explain the situation that we're faced with in regards to the link that was there. So the link, this is Tesco's Westridge Centre. This is Bullen Road, and this is where the application kind of site is. This is the coach house for locational purposes that we've discussed. So an application, the original application sought to put the footpath cycleway through this woodland. This is an ancient semi-natural woodland. The NPPF increases, the new NPPF increases the protection given to that, and should we approve development that would harm the ancient natural semi-woodland, which the footpath would, because it would remove ground cover, you would have to go to the Secretary of State in order to get their approval for that. Officers considered that the impact on that ancient natural semi-woodland was greater than the benefits associated with that footpath and who would use it and how often. It would be through the middle of a woodland. So it would, in my opinion, this is purely my opinion, limit the time in which it would be suitable to use. I certainly would not use that in the evening or in the dark or at dusk. And therefore you have a footpath that would be available for a period of the day in order to provide access to Tesco's. The alternative, as I stated before, is the application includes a footpath on the southern side of Bullen Road to connect to the existing footpath within Coathy Way. That would then allow you to walk either along Bullen Road or along Brading Road to go to Tesco's. Or alternatively, you could walk along Coathy Way potentially and then come through and come up here to avoid a section of Brading Road. So yes, you would be on road rather than an off-road route, but it was considered that actually, should you wish to walk to Tesco's, it's not a significantly greater inconvenience to go along the roadway than it would be through the woodland, especially considering the potential safety issues associated with having a footpath going through the centre of that woodland. Interestingly, we do have a comment on the application on the new consideration when we went back out for consultation, which actually asked for that footpath to be removed for safety reasons, because they considered that to be fundamentally unsafe to go through the woodland. So alternatives, because that is such a vast area of woodland, an alternative route hasn't been looked at, because the alternative would be Coathy Way or Brading Road, and they weren't considered, certainly by officers, to be substantially greater inconvenience to the user and potentially would be safer due to the limitations of the woodland path. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Supplementary, Councillor Gladwin. Microphone, please. Thank you.
Relating to the first phase of Westacre, where there was flooding that took place, and at the site visit on Friday, I did ask about that, and I was concerned that actually you didn't seem to know the details of that. And you then inquired to the agent, and you were informed that there was an undocumented and unlawful drainage pipe which discharges a highway drain from Circular Road through the allotments and into the new housing site, and that the developer's solicitors have written to Island Roads, but to date they have not responded. It is a matter that is being chased because Island Roads have been informed to rectify. And I'm just concerned that obviously this is an issue that is still ongoing. And I was wondering if there's a possibility that there could be other similar problems with similar unlawful drainage pipes, and I was wondering if it's possible to have a survey done to make sure that there is nothing like that that can happen with the main development of Westacre.
Thank you, Councillor Gladwin. Ms Wilkinson.
I suppose it's a slightly tricky question to answer, in that we can't foresee the unforeseen, I suppose, is my answer to that question, in that the developer was not aware that there was a drainage pipe that was unlawfully draining. This is their words. into the highway drain into the site. It is a matter that needs to be rectified some way or another. It will be rectified. So should a situation occur in relation to the current application, this isn't kind of necessarily part of the current application. This was as part of phase 1 or Hope Road. They would have to rectify it and they would have to resolve it. It isn't something that has been caused by the development, as it were. It is something that's outside of the scheme. There isn't a survey that can be undertaken because it's simply an unknown. They're not aware that it was there or which way it was pumping. So it would be a case of monitoring it and then rectifying it should a similar issue occur. There's no reason to presume a similar issue would occur.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. I'm going to move us into the debate section. That doesn't prevent questions being asked of officers, but I think it might help galvanise things together and perhaps coalesce other questions. Councillor Quirk.
The island needs affordable homes and it needs a lot of them. This site makes a contribution to that. We've considered this twice before. I don't think we've heard any new material planning issues raised this evening that were not raised in the previous 2 times that this has come to committee. There's nothing raised in the report that says we should change our mind. The officer recommendation is that we should support and approve this approval. You can't please everyone. In planning terms, very rarely can you even please most people, but we have to make decisions, and that the island needs this site approved and built out with quality homes from a developer that has a reputation for actually building out their sites, rather than some like penny feathers that have been sitting there for 10 years and nothing at all has happened. So I think we need to approve this. I propose that we accept the officer recommendation, and just with one little caveat, that the previous time we approved this, we said that we had to have at least 70% of the affordable housing would be affordable rented housing, and I think we should keep that that condition in, as well as the planning conditions that we have that are specific planning issues. So,
thank you, Councillor Quirk. I'm just going to take a pause while officers confer. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just clarify with Councillor Quirk? So the previous resolution and the current draft 106 secures 71% rather than 70. Is that what you're proposing? Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. So proposal by Councillor Quirk, is that seconded by Councillor Brodie? Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I second it and I'll speak later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spink.
Thank you. I'd just like to take issue with my colleague here, Councillor Quirk, that the island needs affordable homes. What the island needs is social rented homes. That's the real imperative here. This is a housing estate for 473 dwellings, the lion's share, 65% of which will be market value housing, not affordable by islanders on the average island wage. We don't actually need those houses, apart from the fact that we've got a target, but that's no reason to actually grant permission. So what will the affordable, the relatively small affordable element provide? Well, it's generally recognised, we've had briefings on it by planning officers, that the affordable houses for sale with a 20% discount will not be affordable by islanders on the average wage. So why do we need those? I had hoped that the affordable housing to rent would be social rent. It's not. It's a 20% discount on market value. We all know that market value rents are going through the ceiling. 20% off will not be affordable to islanders. You have to weigh in the planning balance. You have to weigh in the planning balance what this site is going to cause. It's not going to cause, as far as I can see, any real benefit. We can talk about it providing much needed affordable housing, but actually it's not going to be affordable to islanders. And the downside of granting this is huge. And I think we should start listening to our residents. We've got 2 councils who have opposed this. We've got numerous residents who oppose it. And the reality is that this will be a sprawling housing estate, which virtually joins the ride to Nettleston and Seaview, depriving our residents of what's sometimes called a green lung, causing coalescence, which is protected under the NPPF. It will inevitably bring severe traffic jams. I don't care what Island Roads say. You can't have, what will it be? Most of the market housing, given that they're 3 and 4 bedrooms, will be relatively wealthy people who buy them. Highly likely they'll have 2 vehicles. Just about everyone does these days, although I don't as it happens, but most people do. So that will be an extra several hundred of cars on our roads. Our roads can't cope. Our sewers can't cope. It will mean more sewage in the Solent and on our beaches. Even if it goes to Sandown, on way, it'll go through pumping stations, which discharge when it rains, which it does rather a lot, into the Solent. It will put more sewage in our Solent. I don't want to go on and on because I think it's obvious that there will be huge disadvantages for the community. And I can't see any plus points for the community. In my view, we should start listening to our residents, provided there are material planning considerations to refuse. And there are material planning considerations to refuse, as I've just outlined. So I shall be voting against this motion. And as I've said, it seems to me that there's nothing to gain. We're going to concrete over our island for little benefit to those who need housing. And it's simply a sham. And I've fed up with being tried to force to vote for these shams, and I shan't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Anybody who else wishes to contribute? Otherwise, I'll come back to Councillor Brodie, who is seconding the motion. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I'd like to pick up on, Councillor Spink mentioned about housing targets. Well, I think housing targets are very relevant. I know the extreme work and just the frustration we've had over the housing targets, getting agreement with the IPS and getting what we think is actually a deliverable number for our island. We're currently under presumption in favour. And if we keep refusing such developments as this, then I can't see that situation changing. And I think that is an important factor here. I think as well, in terms of what we've heard today, I think Councillor Quirk said that, to my mind, I haven't heard anything that has actually changed to make me think differently and look differently at this application. I think in terms of the applicant, as Councillor Quirk also said, we know, we've seen how this applicant can deliver. I know if we could have everything social housing, wouldn't that be absolutely wonderful? But we have to live in the real world. And I think we face a choice here between trying to get the best possible delivery, a mix that we can, whilst it's still being viable for the developer, for the applicant. And we have to bear that in mind and we have to give weight to it. So I will be supporting this application and the officer's recommendation for conditional commission. Thank you. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andre. Additional comments from colleagues? Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. And here we are a third time. It's and we've had presentation we've heard before. Not much has changed. What has changed, any changes, has been positive as far as I'm concerned. Positive changes in the material planning considerations. In an ideal world, you know, I'd be voting with Councillor Spink. I want councils building housing. I want socially rented housing. I'd like the current government to actually deliver on its promise to deliver the sort of homes they say they're going to deliver. I'm very sceptical about it. But the only model we have is delivery through private developers, through a percentage, which is based on an economic model. I refer to it a lot, I represent the biggest housing development on the island in a generation, known as the Pan Meadows development, which Ms. Wilkinson was also the planning officer for. In those days, it was only 30% affordable. This one, we're getting 35%, and potentially, we heard tonight, 40% if the further negotiations with SNG Housing are successful. 70%. And I have to say to you, I haven't seen many houses left empty for weeks or months on end. Those 70% went rapidly. It took 15 years to build that development, but those 70% rapidly. I now represent those 855 houses, not 473, 855, and they're full of people who are first-time buyers, who were given assistance with buying the purchase schemes to buy cheaply. I don't know if Captive are planning to do that, but that's what Barratt Homes did at the time. There are also a lot of private sector rented, I have to say. I'd rather that wasn't the situation, but that is what's happened. We have private landlords who moved in there. Now, 30% that we got there provided homes, 200 rented and 50 shared ownership. And they were like manna from heaven, if there is such a place, from an atheist, for people on the housing register at that time. And our housing register is far worse now, 2,500 people. I forget the figure of the number of people who were classed as homeless, but it's horrific. And this development will provide 118 rented affordable homes. Now, I know the definition of affordable is something government's brought in, the previous government brought in, and it's about 20% less. It's going to be Sovereign, apparently, SNG as they're now known, as their landlord. And in my experience, their rents are around about 70, 71, 72% of the market rent anyway, because they're a housing association and that's their aspiration to keep rents as low as possible. There'll also be a significant number of shared ownership. If the extension that they're talking about with SNG goes on, it will be 137 affordable rented homes. Now just imagine what that means to people on the housing register who have no prospect of a secure home, who are going to be living in the private rented sector at the risk of no risk eviction, which is still something this government hasn't got rid of. Hopefully that will happen sometime in the near future, but some security with rents slightly below the market rent. And frankly, a lot of the people who will be in them will be subsidised by the housing benefit system through the tax system. Now, you may not approve of that, but that's frankly what happens. For a lot of the tenants of housing associations, they're subsidised by the housing benefit system and they pay what they can afford. And that's the key phrase, Councillor Spink, what they can afford. And that's what you could have provided by this. In conclusion, I've heard nothing tonight that has persuaded me otherwise from the view I took back in July 2021, twice, much to the disgust of so many people in Ryde for, you know, whatever reasons. The view I took in April 2023. Many allegations were made against me during those process. I was cleared of everything by the appeal court. Some of the public speakers today repeated those allegations. They want to be ashamed of themselves. The pressure they put me on as an individual councillor is something that only Councillor Gladwin can only imagine, to be frank. The pressure. I ended up having cancer, and I blame that on the whole process that I've endured, frankly. This caused me immense difficulties indeed. I hope you'll support this application. I hope you do conclusively approve it, and let's move on, provide homes for people. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brodie. We have a motion that's been proposed and seconded. So unless anyone else wishes to speak, we will move to the vote. So the vote is to accept officer recommendation to approve this application, subject to the 71-29 split. All those in favour of approval? And against? And that's no abstentions, therefore. So that proposal is carried. Thank you. We move on then to members' question time. Any questions from colleagues? Councillor Spink.
Just a quick question. Is it possible, please, to be given statistics for when we grant a resident planning resolution and it's eventually a decision notice is issued, as to how many people that development, when it's built out, takes off the housing register? Is that a detail that we could have? I've tried to get it from housing associations and they won't give it to me. So is that some detail? I'm not saying the names of them, but how many people come off the register?
Thank you. That is a good question. I think the answer is that we will need to follow that up, and we'll get back to you. That information, from what I understand from Mr. Bolter, doesn't exist within the council. Is that correct?
I did, but it's a long time ago. I did raise it on the Somerton application for the reservoir there.
Yes.
And we were going to look into it then. That was nearly 2 years ago.
I will follow that up and chase it up. But yes, we don't have an answer as yet. And I'll look into it. Thank you. Mr. Fuller, Councillor Fuller, I beg your pardon. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you for letting me back. It's a similar question, coincidentally, that Councillor Spink had. We as a planning committee have approved a lot of planning applications over the period of time. But after we approve them as a planning committee, we don't know what actually happens to them. Now, there's a lot of planning applications that do get approved and they still haven't had decision notice served. It would be great if we could have a paper just giving us an update on where those planning applications are. I know we're going to have the tour lined up in a few weeks' time, but it would be really useful to have a summary of all the applications that this committee has approved since 2021 and where they are in the process, because some of these applications we sit down and we approve, but we never see what the outcomes are. And it would be really useful to go back, if we're spending time as members ploughing through planning application papers, we want to know what the outcomes are going to be, and are the outcomes going to be as favourable as we hope that they would be. So it would be really nice just to have a paper to present to members in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Yeah, we can certainly do that. I think by way of the Wednesday workshops that we've been having, some of those decisions have obviously been ventilated, but not the entirety of them, and where things stand, I think it will be helpful. So I suppose with the caveat of officer time and making sure resources are used effectively, given the constraints with budget cuts, but I absolutely agree with you. I think that is an important aspect to look at. We've got our Good, the Bad and the Ugly tour coming up quite soon, so I will schedule that in for the Wednesday workshop. Thereafter, I should probably not use that shorthand name that internally is discussed, but certainly we will have that as a Wednesday workshop. Councillor Critchison.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the appeal that is about the landscape lane application, and I'm not sure everyone here will be aware of the result of that, so I wonder if the officers could speak about that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Critchison. Ms Wilkinson.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Christian. I will speak at that. I will be honest, due to preparation for this evening, I haven't read the full inspector's decision. I've only read the summary. So, but I can provide that. In essence, the landscape lane application was allowed at appeal, and we had full costs against us for the decision. The concern of the inspector was in essence to Precy, but the decision I believe has been sent to everybody, so you can read it in full, was that twofold really, that the application resulted in enhancements to the existing road network or improvements to the existing road network. It didn't provide the link onto Long Lane, but it did provide one onto Staplers. It did enhance bus links, bus provision, bus stops, and therefore it did sufficient for its own mitigation. So it's, you know, we've discussed it quite a lot, and an application needs to mitigate for its own harm. The site was currently poorly accessed. It was providing enhancements to the existing situation, which the inspector considered to be gave great weight to the materiality of those enhancements. Secondly, the concern was that there was no evidence presented of how it would cause danger to pedestrians or harm to pedestrians, because there was no accident data for the existing road. There was no indication that would be harmful. So it falls back to that position from an officer's advice in that Island Roads were happy with the scheme, I believe, and that the situation was such that if we go against a proposal in that nature, the evidence that we need to then defend that is quite substantial when you're arguing for harm, because you have to be able to identify what that harm is and how that harm has occurred. And you had a road where I believe, again, I apologise, and this will be in the decision, but my understanding is there was no accident data to demonstrate there was any existing issue. And therefore there wasn't necessarily something that needed to be resolved. It was simply a scheme that was providing enhancements and a betterment, to use the word that the inspector used, in relation to the existing network.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Follow-up, supplementary, additional questions from colleagues? In which case that draws things to a conclusion. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you.